Hello, welcome to this session on Essentialism. So this is a request that you all made in the Lighthouse Series. I'm taking in requests as they're coming in. And I want to start off this topic today with a story. This is actually a real life story of a friend of mine who shared with me a couple of years ago and is very pertinent to what we're here to talk about. So the story goes that this lady is one of three daughters, and their parents migrated from a little village in Punjab in India. And they packed up everything there and they migrated here with the hopes of creating a better life, both for themselves and for the future generations. And so, as you can imagine, for somebody coming in first generation, coming in here and settling down, they worked really, really hard. Both the parents worked really hard to put the kids through school, give them the best of opportunity, put them through college. And then as the fruits of their labor, all three girls did very well for themselves. Now, two things that the father would always talk about as having like a wish that he had for the family. One was that he wanted to take them all to, as a family, to go to Napa. You know, imagine that when the girls are grown up, some of them are married, some of them have kids, some of them are not yet married, but with all that mix of all of those priorities, he had this wish, very simple wish, because they lived in the Bay Area. Napa's not that far, but somehow it just kept getting postponed. And the second wish that he had for the children is that one of the girls was working for Google and he wanted to go visit the Google campus. And as some of you who know, having had that visit or know about people who visited, it's not a big deal at all. You can go anytime, as long as you have somebody who works there. They become your host and they take you around, and then very likely that they're going to invite you to stay on and have a meal. There's lots of, famous for the free meals. So you want to do that little simple pleasure of seeing his daughter's workplace. So one morning, this gentleman gets up, and as he always does, he goes for a morning walk. And this day, he goes for his morning walk and does not return. The next thing, they get a phone call from EMS that their father had a heart attack while he was going on his morning walk, and he died instantly, and they never would see him again, never had a chance to talk to him. Now think about that. Those simple desires that he had, very simple things, for whatever reason, kept getting pushed off and off to the point where it was too late and you cannot rewind the clock, and what's gone is gone. Some dreams are just left unfulfilled. So the reason I'm sharing this story with you is when you talk to doctors and nurses, there was actually a compilation of the biggest regrets that people share at the end of their lifetime. Now, the number two thing, the second thing on that list, is that they had these small things that they wanted to do with their family, but for whatever reason got put off because work came in the way, some other priorities came in the way, and they could not. And that comes to a point when you're too late, too little, too late, and you don't have any energy to get up and go. And then you regret these things. And that's one of the things that comes up in conversation. So how does all of this relate to what we're here to talk about? So the topics that was actually suggested to me is minimalism. Okay, so minimalism, if you don't know what that topic means, is that how can we make an investment in quality of life than in things? Some of you might have read my quote. One of the mantra that I live by is invest in experiences, not in stuff. Have stories to tell, not stuff to show. Right? So that's minimalism here. So where your focus is on not collecting and cluttering your life up with so many things that you don't have a place to live, but keeping it to a minimum, right? What is the absolute essentials? Now, but I took it further. When the suggestion was made by one of you all, I took it further and said, you know what? Before we get into the concept of minimalism, I want to talk about essentialism. Okay, this is a book that I read by Greg McKeown, and it is a mindset. It is a mindset that says essentialism is about discerning between the external noise and the internal voice. I'm going to say this again. Essentialism is the art of discerning between the external noise and the internal voice. Because we get so caught up in this doing. Somehow we've been sold into this myth that more is better. But then once in a while you get to realize that you keep say that, keep it simple, KISS philosophy, right? Less is more. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is actually less is more meaningful and more is mediocre. Okay, so everybody's capable of just going on and packing their lives, doing more, getting more, committing to more, etc. But what that leaves you with is no time to actually contemplate and reflect on these things, such as the ones I shared with you in the story. What really matters to you at the end of the day? Why are you doing what you're doing? And if you hear a lot of people's stories, and actually, by the way, I talked about the second biggest regret people have at the end of their life. The first biggest regret is living somebody else's dream, not yours. Living somebody else's wishes for what they wanted of you. And that somebody else could be a parent, it could be a community, it could be the peer pressure, it could be the marketing. If you don't have any of these things, guess what? The marketing engines, the multi-billion-dollar engines out there are waiting to tell you what you should be doing and what makes you worthy in this world. So what we're here to talk about is the exact opposite of that, is getting to this question and says, if I had this 1 week to live, what would I value? So this cannot come from running from things to things, running from pillar to post, keeping your packed schedule, going from meetings to meetings, right? It has to be a time when you actually create an openness, create space in your life where you're able to sit down and contemplate, reflect on what is it that is going to bring you meaning. And this is actually a very interesting thing, that space that you create. It is that space in which your subconscious mind is talking to your conscious mind. It is a thing of the knowingness, the inner voice, as I told you in the initial quote. The inner voice is able to talk to the planning, the reasoning, and the more so-called intelligent part of you that is going to execute upon that wish, upon that desire, and upon that deep voice that is trying to speak to you. And for that, there's no way that you're going to be able to do it when the superficial mind is very, very busy. So therefore, it's a very important thing to carve out and say, how can I say no to situations? If I can't say no, if I'm too nice of a person, I feel it very impolite to say no to people, I'm going to ask you to replace that with a delayed yes. Okay, so just because somebody asks you to do it, even if it's your boss who's paying you, you don't have to commit to it right then. Maybe you say, let me think about it. Let me sleep over it. I'm going to come back to you with a decision. Okay, and then maybe sit down and reflect upon what is it that how does that task that has been given to you or that you are asked to accept, how does that fit into your value system? Okay, now let me share with you a set of steps that is going to help you to determine how do you know whether something that's being thrown at you is actually valuable or not. Now, everything in this world these days are polls, right? We take opinion polls, we take popularity votes, etc. So you all know about the scale of 1 to 10. Even many times, even in this forum, I've asked you folks on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you like a particular format, or how do you like a particular date, or what, etc. And you all have voted. So similarly, I ask that you consider on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that particular aspect, that task that you've been given? And that task is something not necessarily given by a boss. It's also things that in your daily routine. Examine yourself and say, okay, in a given day or in a given week, I have 10 things that consume 80 to 90% of my time. And then of course, there's 10 to 20% variables that are not necessarily repetitive tasks, but things that happen new, like, I have to get my car fixed, or, something special happens to my neighbor, or I need to go spend time with. I'm keeping those outliers aside. Talk about the 80 to 90% of your sort of mundane, day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month kind of activities, and say, if you break down and look at each individual tasks and look at it on a scale of 1 to 10, how valuable, how important is that task to you? Now, Once you have determined that, the value and the effectiveness of that task, take things that score 8 to 10, so 8, 9, and 10, and leave out the ones that score 1 to 7. Okay, very important thing. This is a homework that only you can do for yourself. So what are the high value, high effectiveness tasks in my mundane day-to-day activities that are consuming my life? And say, can I just focus on these first 3 things, 8, 9, and 10, and then keep the other ones aside? Create space. Just say that, you know what, I'm going to just let it be. And see, how is your quality of life? How is your level of satisfaction? How is level of peace? Your concentration, your sense of fulfillment, how does that change when you make this evaluation? And so one of the things that people find very, very hard to do in this society, where we are just taught, we're just conditioned to consume more, want more, be more, do more, sign up for more. This idea of FOMO. If you haven't heard that word FOMO, it's a very popular word that goes around in social media these days, fear of missing out. So if you notice, what I'm proposing is that I want you to miss out. And I want you to realize there's something that comes out of missing out that is a sense of joy. So I'm offering to you this idea of joy of missing out. So replace FOMO with JOMO, the joy of missing out. So it's that incredible spaciousness that you feel when you're not just being a cog in the wheel, a machine that just keeps taking on stuff, doing things, and you're actually a cog in somebody else's wheel. You're working towards some other person's dream or some other system's sense of what you should be doing. You're a machine, you're a robot, not thinking for yourself. So I ask that you make intentional intervention into your robotic way of living and ask yourself, how valuable and how effective is this for me? So in that process of learning to take space for yourself, there's a sense of what might arise at the initial phases of this way of thinking, which is a sense of boredom. Because the mind is so used to, you're such an action-oriented person, you have been all your life, and your muscle memory is telling you that you have to jump from one thing to the other. Why, how come I have this quiet time? I feel like I'm being useless. But I tell you, it is in that quietness, it is in those moments of doing nothingness or boredom, that's where clarity and creativity come into existence. And I say this, folks, for those of you, especially those of you who are raising children or grandchildren, this is a very, very important thing, because these days, this concept of boredom is non-existent. We have this technology that we are able to outsource all sorts of boredom and entertainment out to. So for example, if a child comes to us, Mommy, I'm not feeling, I'm feeling very bored. I'm not feeling, excited about something. Guess what? When you stick something in the child's face, you're going to give an iPhone, give an iPad, what have you, and then say, go watch this video or go play with this video game. But then what you don't realize that you're doing is that you're basically gnawing away very, very slowly at the creativity of the individual. Because you think about those times when we did not have this technology that we are immersed in right now, we had to be creative about how we're going to use that time. Right? We had to be creative about how we're going to fill that space. I ask that you afford that to the generations that are here and are yet to come. Because the moment we take away the creativity and outsource it to a box in the wall or a box in their hand, then that particular creative muscle is getting weakened. And so when they need it, they don't have that level of creativity. So folks, it's very important to cherish, to nurture that boredom and make that a beautiful creative opportunity for you to be able to come up with something which is really truly out of the box, and you're not just being a robot that's going from one task to the next. And then the next thing I want to talk about is in that moments of creativity, in that moments of quietness, I don't want you to confuse pressure for purpose, because not everything is equal in life. Not all activities that are thrown at us are meant to be treated in the same way. And this is where we're getting cheated. We're getting cheated in the busyness, that things that may start to feel some sort of importance in our life. It's just the way that the world is, that they kind of keep trying to pressurize you, remind you, they send you alerts, they send you notifications, making you feel like you're kind of missing out. You kind of need to feel guilty about not committing to that task that has been thrown at you. So that pressure, if we do not discern it carefully, becomes important to us. You all must have heard about Stephen Covey's The 4 Quadrants, right? So he talks about this idea of, in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about these things that are important and urgent. And don't confuse the two. There are things that are important that may not be urgent. There are things that may not be urgent but are important. And there are things that may not be important or urgent. So if we do not take time to discern these 4 buckets, then you give equal rating to everything and we go after it. And at the end of the day, we're super tired, exhausted, but then there's a sense of meaninglessness. That's when you end up with those stories like the ones I started sharing with. It's like you're in the pursuit of doing things, but not really getting anywhere as far as your purpose. So it's very important to understand, to take time again to discern what brings me a sense of purpose and what are things that are not aligned with my purpose, and they're just being put on me as pressure. And the next thing I want to talk about is confusing this idea of effort and output. So sometimes you think that just because you're working harder, you're being more productive. Well, that's not necessarily the case. It's sometimes sitting with the issue, discerning, contemplating on it, and saying, how can I be much more effective in my utilization of my resources? Whether that means my time, my muscle energy, my mental energy, my connections, etc. They're all different kinds of resources that you can throw at any task to accomplish it. And ask yourself, how can I be actually more efficient with the effort rather than focus on just putting in a harder work, expecting that harder work will probably give me a better result. No, that's not necessarily the case. So try to be more sensible with which you're engaged with, such that it's actually getting you to your goal, to your purpose, with the least amount of energy. And this actually goes back to the famous motivational triad. I've mentioned this a few times in some of my workshops, you might remember. So the motivational triad says the evolution of the human brain can be summarized in 3 things, right? So the human brain today operates, 1, to avoid pain, pursue pleasure, and preserve energy. Okay, so I'll say that again. The motivational triad: avoid pain, pursue pleasure, and conserve energy. So the human brain by default is wired to fit into one of any task that is thrown at it. It's going to try to slot it in the way, how can I put the least amount of energy, conserve energy? How can I be lazy? In other words, conserve in that sense. And then if it's going to bring out some sort of ugly reality of the situation, even if it's real, I want to avoid it. But if it's going to be something that's going to give me a high, then I want to pursue it. Okay. But that is actually a very animalistic or a very primitive way. It is not a humanistic, or it's not something that is working from our higher, more evolved part of our brain. It's more our primitive brain that's working on the fight, flight, fear modality. So in order for you to make sure that you're not getting caught up in that default network of the fight and flight, which is that primitive way of thinking, you need to contemplate. You need to take time. You need to reflect and say, how can I make this the most effective, best use of my energy? And the next thing is social media. Folks, we are all inundated with gadgets. Now, the gadgets have done immensely towards making our life easier. It's given us a lot of access to facilities and resources and information in ways that, and even communication, in ways that, we couldn't have imagined even 20 years ago. But what happens is that with the devices come social media, and with social media comes this whole idea of popularity contests, opinion sharing. So not only these digital devices are making us have an data overload, we're also getting into this other thing that not many people talk about, is opinion overload. Everybody has an opinion. I have an opinion, you have an opinion. And if you think about it, a large percentage of all the social media sharing that's going on back and forth is how people feel about a certain subject. And then you feel like, okay, I've shared something, and therefore I have to defend my statement. Some people might have a different opinion and I don't agree with them, and they make me look bad. They make me look like I have some wrong, and I have to go there and defend myself. I have to comment. I have to let my voice be heard. I say that really is a big, big waste of time. It sucks a lot of your energy and takes you away from some of those things that we're here to talk about, which is what is essentially meaningful and purposeful to you. So try to avoid that. Try to avoid getting into this thing of, having to comment on everything and having to attend to things that are really, just people's opinions. And then the next thing is that, just because you're having more meetings on your calendar doesn't mean you're a much more effective, important person. If you listen to the story of Warren Buffett, they say that his biography said that his schedule is pretty much blank most days of the week. And so you ask the question, so first of all, how does he do it? He says he sets up times when he's going to talk to his investors. He sets up time when he has to talk to the different boards that he's on. But then for the majority of the part, he's using that empty space on his calendar to learn, to read up, to reflect upon it, which is why he is outside the box in many senses. He's called the Oracle of Omaha for a reason, that he's not just running with the rest of the herd, but he's actually creating a completely new perspective on looking at existing issues. So that comes from actually giving yourself space. And so the other thing that a lot of times is that the idea of newness, creating newness, and you do not really want to give your brain power to everything that pops up, because this again is one of the things. The devices constantly keep wanting to have you on alert. They want to tell you that, this is happening here, that's happening there, some friends group, etc., etc. So stay on the primary contributions and the real results. So think about that space that you open up by not committing to all those meetings, not committing to all those different things that pop up on your screen or pop up, get notified on your devices. And actually, it gives you the ability to focus. It gives you the ability to do things that are high importance, high value, as we've determined in a previous item I talked about, giving yourself the rating of 8 or 10. So figure out what those high effectiveness, high value items, and then in order for you to execute on them, to run with them, you need to, again, not get distracted. So one of the things about essentialism is, now that you've narrowed in on what is it you want, those few things that really mean a lot to you, you pick up and run with it. There's no more time wasted. You don't want these distractions. So it's important to create these hygienic areas. I call it hygiene in that sense that it's clear of any distractions in your mind. So actually, this noise that we talked about is the filth, or is that is the contamination that prevents you from pursuing and executing on those things that you consider yourself to be high value. Think about it. Think about how many times you just opened up Facebook just to check on one thing, or opened up WhatsApp or whatever, you pick your favorite application. And the next thing you know, half an hour or an hour has passed as you were flicking through different things. Something popped up, something showed up, something sounded interesting. So that's what I'm talking about. So that is the contamination that's keeping you away from your ability to focus and execute on those things that you selected. So with that said, I would like to turn this conversation into a reflection exercise where I'm going to take you through a deep contemplation exercise. And then from the stillness of the quiet mind, I'm going to pose to you 5 questions. And those are very important questions, folks. So let's go along. So first of all, I want to start off with the somatic exercise as I always do. So give me a big, nice shoulder roll. So pick up your shoulders, and as you're breathing in, pick it up. And as you're dropping your shoulders, breathe out. So taking it, rolling back, up, forward, and dropping it. Exhaling through the mouth, breathing in through the nostrils. Now I want you to reverse the direction of the shoulder rolls. I want you to start off by taking in your shoulders forwards. And as you're breathing in, you're lifting, and then you're dropping your shoulders as you're breathing out through your mouth. Now settling in as we're getting into the next phase of our journey here. With your eyes open or closed, whatever feels comfortable. I want you to drop into your body. Taking a nice comfortable breaths, keeping in the breathing in and out going. I want you to notice the rise and the collapse of the abdomen, not the chest. Just like when you see a baby sleeping very peacefully, you'll see that the stomach is what rises and falls, not the chest. And with each passing breath, I want you to gently turn your attention inwards. Bringing your attention into the skin, inside the body, through the flesh. Into the bones. To the very core of the body. At the core of the body, there's an energy that flows. And it's an energy that flows from the top of the head down through the core channel, all the way to the legs and to the feet. I want you to feel your feet right now. Wiggle them if you need to. But feel your feet right now. And if you can feel them, that means there's energy there. Now, gradually through the bottom of the soles, I want you to take your attention to the heel, to the back of the foot. Feel your heels on both legs. And then gradually let that energy trace its way up through the shins, through the calves, and into the knees. Feel both your knees right now. And gradually take your attention further up through the thighs to the back. Feel your hip region. And feel the point of contact your back is making with the seat, with the floor, or if you're lying down with your bed. And gradually let that attention go up through the spine, from the bottom of the spine, past the abdomen, into the chest region, to the back, to the bottom of the neck. Now I want you to feel the tips of your fingers. Roll your thumb along the tips of your fingers if you need to, but I want you to feel them. If you can feel the tips of your fingers, that means there's energy there. Now gradually let that energy flow through the fingers, through the knuckles, to your palm, the palms on both hands. And from the surface of the palm going through the wrist, let the attention go up through the upper forearm to the elbows. And then from the elbows, let it go through the upper arm, through the biceps and triceps, into the shoulders. And from the shoulders, let's go towards the neck and up through the bottom of the neck, through the back of the neck, to the top of the neck and into the head region. Let's go up from the back of the head all the way up to the top of the head, to the scalp. And following the scalp to the front of the head. To the bridge of the forehead, which is where the nose meets the eyebrows. I want you to pay attention to this area for a few moments. This is the seat of all memories. This region is the seat of all creativity. This area is the seat of consciousness. Seated here behind these eyes, somewhere just below the brain, I, the being, am looking out through these eyes. I am listening through these ears. I'm smelling through this nose. I'm tasting through this tongue. And it's from here that I'm experiencing the sensation of touch through the vast surface of the skin on this body. It is from this command center that I operate this vehicle that I have been given in this journey, or this segment of this journey called life. Now, for a few moments, just rest assured that this is who I really am. And I'm here spending time with myself, giving myself the gift of spaciousness. In this spaciousness, I am able to breathe. The soul is able to breathe for once. And just in this state of being versus doing, I notice how my body becomes relaxed. My breath becomes deep. And my mind begins to become clear. In this state, I'm just being, gifting myself the gift of attention to myself. In this state of being, ask yourself a few questions. Where in my body do I feel a sense of being? Where is this felt sense of being, if there is one place in this body? The next question is, what happens to time in the state of being? And the third question is, does the being need anything to feel complete? The fourth question is, does the being need any knowing to feel any better? And then the final question is, does the being need to do anything to feel or do better? Now at your own pace, just when you feel you want to gently open your eyes and come back to our circle. And as you do so, when you feel ready, I want you to share your responses to those 5 questions that I posed. Where do you feel a felt sense of being? What happens to time? Does the being need anything to feel more complete? Does the being need any knowing to feel better? And finally, does the being need to do anything to do any better? So I invite you to go ahead and type in these answers in the chat window. And then I also invite you at the same time, if you have any questions that came up, to please post those in the Q&A window. You'll have a little Q&A icon at the bottom, and please put those questions there. And that way I'm able to read and take them in the order that they have arrived. Okay, I already have a question. So while you all are typing, I'm just going to go ahead and take this question. So Jayraj is asking, where is this place? Okay, so yes, I have shared with many of you that, those of you who attended previous sessions, that I always use a different background in these meetings, because I want to share with you the travels that I've done. And one of my love is photography. And this is from a place called Gulbatse. So Gulbatse is in not Bosnia, not Croatia, but the other country, Serbia. So this is on the eastern frontier of Serbia, where Serbia meets Romania. There is this ancient palace, or ancient castle. And it's got a very interesting story. This castle was actually quite dilapidated. Nobody used to ever go there, because what happened is it's so run down, it's so old, that there used to be a highway that used to, believe it or not, run through this castle. So for whatever reason, they decided to build the road that ran through this castle. And every time there would be a truck that would go through it, it would rumble. So then it was very, very unsafe for people to go. And so imagine that whole thing was shaking and falling apart. Right on this, by the way, the river that you're seeing here is the river Danube, which actually is the border, is a river dividing Serbia with Romania. And so then subsequently the people petitioned, they got lots of signatures, they got the government to get after their case, and they lobbied for that highway to be moved outside of the castle. And actually it runs next to the castle now. And there's also weight limitations for the size of vehicles. But then they have retrofitted it. They've done a lot of modifications. And the castle had just opened up 3 months before I was passing through Serbia. And I got the opportunity to have a tour of this place. It's simply magnificent, one of the best spots in Eastern Europe. Great question. So fine. So then I'm getting some comments here. Felt completely free and blissful in these free-falling mode of freedom. I love your poetic words. In this free-falling modes of freedom, all of my needs felt met. And so folks, so that's the point. Thank you for sharing that comment. And that's the point of this exercise. This exercise goes to show how much of our wantingness, right? How much of our craving to go out and get something, do something, be somewhere, become somebody, comes from that emptiness of not really connecting with oneself. As you can notice that in this last 20 minutes, that's all we did. We did 20 minutes of exercise, very simple. You can go ahead and repeat it at the convenience of your own comfort of your bed or living room, whatever it is. And just taking that moment to just kind of looking inside yourself, being that observer, following the energy in your body, following the breath, and seeing you're connected with yourself, and then by realizing your connection with everything around you, there is a sense of joy. Remember I said that before? It is the joy of missing out versus the fear of missing out. And you cannot take these moments unless you carve out. So there's not enough. Now, I don't want meditation to be yet another thing for you to be doing. Well, that beats the whole point of essentialism, right? We don't want to just add something new to this basket that already is brimming with full of stuff. Well, what I'm asking you to do is to realize what is not important, which is 70%. By the way, I took that brave comment where I said 70% of what you seem to have piled your life up with is probably not as valuable and as effective to get you to your sense of purpose. So carve that stuff out and then give yourself spaciousness. And when you have spaciousness, take these moments of reflection, this contemplation that I've just shared with you as an example, and see how fulfilled you can be just in the comfort of your own living room, wherever you are. Okay. So with that, I'd like to ask if there's any other questions, any other comments that you'd like to share. So just so you all know, my journey started on something along the same lines as this question that came up, and there was a topic recommendation for minimalism. And I was asking myself, this pursuit of this mad pursuit of stuff, was I going to feel fulfilled at the end of the journey of having achieved, having climbed up that ladder, right? In terms of society, in terms of titles, in terms of degrees. And then I asked myself, what is more important to me? Do I want to be able to invest things in things may not be necessarily recognized by the measures of society as something being important, but in my life, in my own metric system, in my own evaluation, I deem this thing as a valuable contribution in creating that world that I wish to live in, creating that space, spreading that light that I want to be living in the midst of. What does it take? It doesn't take anything for you to share your own kindling or your own flame with those around you. So whatever it is, and I say this, and I do this as meditation and these wisdom talks, but you could have your own gift. And as Oprah Winfrey said, your gift could be sweeping a bathroom floor. Whatever it is, find that gift and become the best in it. Invest in actually becoming really good in that gift that you've been blessed with. And it could be something that many people may not consider to be important, but that's the thing that sparks your fire. It lights up your life. And stay with that. Once you've found it, invest in it and pick up with that and run with it, because nobody else can actually make you feel fulfilled. There's nothing else that'll give you more satisfaction than honing that skill that you've been gifted with and then sharing it with the world. So with that, folks, I'm not seeing many more questions. So I'd like to thank you for your time. And like I said again, do not confuse busyness with effectiveness. And this is a conversation where you want to be able to discern between the external noise and the internal voice. So that to you is the essence of our topic today, which is essentialism. With that, I'd like you to go out and enjoy yourself, stay well, be happy. I'll see you all in about a week's time from now. Until then, be well.